Have you ever wondered what would happen if three hopeless, abandoned colts were nursed back to strength by a girl who refused to give up on them and then went on to face the biggest equestrian challenge of their lives? In today's story, you'll witness the dramatic journey from the moment these frail horses are deemed worthless to the electrifying showdown where they prove everyone wrong. This story isn't just about horse racing, it's about resilience, heart, and the power of a second chance. Will the underdogs rise against all odds, or will their past define their future? Stay with us until the very end to find out the stunning outcome. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you'll stay updated on all of our heartwarming, inspiring stories. And your support helps us keep sharing tales that uplift and unite us all. Get ready for a gripping ride. In the rolling countryside where lush green fields stretched into the horizon, an estate called Silvercrest Acres stood as a testament to one man's unyielding drive for perfection. Its owner, Mr. Balfour, held considerable influence in equestrian circles. Though not physically imposing, he was of average stature. His commanding presence demanded both respect and caution. Each morning, his stride along the cobblestone walkway linking the main house to the stables conveyed his calculated authority. His steel-gray hair was brushed so meticulously that no strand ever fell out of place. At Silvercrest Acres, Mr. Balfour's approach was straightforward. If a horse showed even a hint of imperfection, it would have no future on his property. Anything less than a potential champion, he dismissed outright, deeming it a waste of valuable time and resources. Walking beside him was Marcus, his loyal assistant, who diligently noted every instruction in a black leather notebook. Marcus, tall and lean, wore his polished riding boots like a uniform. The estate staff understood all too well the meticulous standards imposed by Mr. Balfour. Any oversight was met with stern rebuke. The day started with the soft nicker of thoroughbreds from behind stall doors, a scene that might have been peaceful if not for the undercurrent of tension that always accompanied Mr. Balfour's presence. On this particular morning, a long hush seemed to hang in the stable corridor, as though everyone, human and equine, could sense that something unusual lay ahead. The usual fragrances of fresh hay and the mild soap used to wash down the horses mingled in the air. Marcus hurried to keep up as Mr. Balfour proceeded toward a stall where a ranch hand had indicated something significant had transpired overnight. Word had spread that three foals were born earlier that day, the result of pairing Silvercrest Acres' famed stallion, Iron Tempest, with their top mare, Golden Aurora. The union of these two was carefully orchestrated to produce offspring blending extraordinary speed with flawless grace. Yet as soon as Mr. Balfour arrived at the stall, his expression soured. Instead of seeing three sturdy heirs to his prized lineage, he found three foals trembling with apparent frailty. One was smoky gray, another a dark bay, and the third had a small, star-like marking on its forehead. Their eyes revealed fear and confusion, their legs shaking beyond the normal weakness of newborns. With barely a pause, Mr. Balfour declared them unfit. When Marcus ventured to suggest they might improve with a little time and proper care, Mr. Balfour cut him off with a cold glare. The decree was absolute. These foals would be removed from his sight, for they did not match Silvercrest Acres' standards of excellence. Preparations to haul the three colts away began soon after. The ranch hand tasked with the job did so in silence, aware it was pointless to protest. Under Mr. Balfour's watchful gaze, the animals were ushered into a battered old trailer. The metallic creaking of the ramp and the gentle thumps of unsteady hooves against the trailer's interior walls punctuated the tense atmosphere. Mr. Balfour stood a short distance off, arms folded across his chest, exuding neither regret nor pity. The weak deserved no place in his pursuit of breeding perfection. This mantra, repeated so often, had become his unimpeachable credo. Once the trailer rolled down the estate's gravel road, he pivoted crisply on his heel and headed back to where his true champion bloodlines waited. As it happened, fate had other plans for these three abandoned souls. Traveling along dusty rural paths, the driver and his partner soon neared a wooded area known to be remote and sparsely inhabited. The instructions were simple: dispose of the colts somewhere off the main roads, far enough from Silvercrest Acres that no one would suspect a connection. Despite the disquiet the driver felt, he muttered that discarding new life this way was cruel. He followed orders. The trailer lurched to a stop in a small clearing, surrounded by tall pines. Dust billowed around the vehicle, and the Colts inside let out barely audible, pitiful whinnies. The men lowered the ramp, prodding the foals to exit. Their legs, still too weak to support confident steps, trembled violently as they stumbled onto patchy grass. Once the Colts stood in the clearing, the driver exchanged a grim glance with his colleague. One quietly asked why this had to be done. The other shrugged, claiming it wasn't their concern. They had completed their job. With that, the trailer groaned away, leaving the abandoned Colts behind. Moments later, as the dust from the departing vehicle settled, a young woman named Sienna Rivers peered from behind the trunk of a large fir. She had been returning from a short excursion when the unfamiliar sounds of a distressed trailer caught her attention. Slipping through the underbrush, she witnessed the men depositing the helpless animals. She waited until the trailer disappeared, then cautiously stepped forward. Standing at average height with chestnut hair tied back in a practical ponytail and eyes that radiated empathy, Sienna specialized in rescuing creatures that others deemed too broken, sick, or unprofitable to save. Her gaze flicked across the trembling Colts, and her heart clenched. Each one looked terrified and hungry, bearing the raw vulnerability of life that had scarcely begun. Even from a distance, she could see their ribs pressing against their thin coats. While anger swelled at the cruelty, Sienna's resolve hardened. She would do whatever it took to give them a fighting chance. Guiding the frail Colts back to her modest homestead tested every ounce of patience Sienna possessed. She kept extra rope in her backpack, originally intended for mending fences, but quickly repurposed it into makeshift halters. The Colts resisted at first, not from belligerence but from sheer panic. Their ears flattened, and they attempted to back away, stumbling and nearly toppling in the process. Sienna kept her voice gentle, using soft croons to reassure them she meant no harm. Bit by bit, she coaxed them to walk. Although the distance to her property was only half a mile through the woods, it felt much longer. Each stop to let them rest stretched the journey, but she refused to push them beyond their frail limits. The sun dipped lower in the sky, draping everything in an amber glow by the time they reached her cabin. The structure, though humble, stood on land Sienna had inherited from her grandfather, a compassionate man who had instilled in her an unwavering commitment to animal welfare. Out back stood a small wooden barn, its doors wide enough for a few horses, but certainly not built to accommodate a professional breeding operation. Nevertheless, it was warm and secure. Once inside, she led the Colts onto soft straw and hurried to fetch blankets. She gently draped each trembling body, feeling their slight frames quiver beneath the fabric. Noticing how gaunt they were, she prepared a makeshift milk substitute, carefully heating water and mixing in powder. Their eyes reflected a mix of fear and hunger, but they lapped up the nourishment with halting eagerness. That night, Sienna barely left their side. She cleaned superficial scrapes, speaking in soothing tones all the while. While the forest outside buzzed with nocturnal activity, the barn was oddly hushed, broken only by the occasional whimper or shuffle of hooves. One colt, the smallest of the three, settled closest to her, its tiny muzzle pressed against her arm, as though recognizing she was their only hope. Sienna's heart ached, wondering what sort of person could discard such vulnerable life. She reminded herself that her mission was to focus on what she could do now, not dwell on the cruelty of others. By the time the first rays of morning light crept under the barn door, she had formed a preliminary plan. She would document everything about these newcomers, their feeding schedules, any signs of improvement, and potential health issues, so she could strategize their recovery. Whether they were standard thoroughbreds or some other mix, it mattered little to her. A life was a life, and they deserved the best chance she could provide. Over the subsequent weeks, Sienna poured her time, resources, and emotional energy into helping the Colts rebound from the brink. She kept a handwritten log, taking meticulous notes about each one's behavior, appetite, and weight gain. Their daily routine was simple but crucial: gentle feedings with nutritional supplements, short walks around her small paddock to encourage muscle development, and lots of grooming to promote blood circulation and instill trust. From these moments emerged the first hints of individual personality. The smoky gray colt, initially the most flighty, possessed a piercing gaze that seemed to track Sienna's every movement. The bay colt, a deeper mahogany shade, was more cautious, preferring to stay half a step behind the others. Finally, the runt with the star-like blaze on its forehead displayed a surprising spark of confidence, despite its apparent fragility. Naming them felt like an important milestone, as though it affirmed their place in her life. She called the gray one Tempest, referencing the turbulence she sensed just beneath his anxious exterior. The bay colt became Shade, both for his color and for the watchful, guarded presence he seemed to carry. The small star-marked colt she named Nova, a tribute to the idea of a small star exploding into brilliance. With names, she believed, came identity and the beginning of hope. While providing for their physical recovery, Sienna also had to brace for the toll on her own finances. She spent much of her limited income on high-quality feed and occasional vet consultations. When a traveling veterinarian visited, he mentioned how, under any other circumstance, these colts would likely have perished. Sienna accepted extra jobs around her community, mending fences, cleaning neighbors' barns, even assisting an older gentleman in relocating his stable to cover medical supplies. Despite the mounting workload, she couldn't imagine any other path. She had pledged to these animals, in silent vows each night, that they would not be abandoned again. From day to day, changes were subtle. A firmer step here, a louder whinny of greeting there. Tempest began greeting her at the paddock gate, ears pricked, as though curious about what they might do next. Shade, though still reserved, didn't bolt at sudden noises anymore. Nova delighted in short bursts of speed, his legs showing growing stability, though he remained the smallest by far. As she witnessed these transformations, Sienna felt a sense of awe. She believed each horse carried immense promise, a potential that couldn't be judged by mere first impressions. If anything, their wobbly beginnings fueled a tenacity that stronger, more confident colts sometimes lacked. By their first birthday, the colts had developed from frail shadows into sturdier, albeit still modest, figures of young equine life. Sienna's routine had evolved in tandem. Early mornings were spent preparing specialized grain mixtures and checking hooves for any signs of infection or misalignment. Midday sessions might involve gentle groundwork exercises, coaxing them over small logs or around barrels to improve coordination. Evenings often ended with her brushing their coats, humming a soft tune. Through it all, the trio gained muscle and confidence. She found herself marveling at how Tempest's gray coat shimmered in the sun, how Shade had begun to step forward with minimal urging, and how Nova, that undersized fighter, would trot tirelessly until the others tired out. Observing these incremental victories led Sienna to wonder if her horses could one day compete. Local events sometimes welcomed mixed-breed entries, focusing less on heritage and more on ability and training. Though she was no stranger to rescuing horses, the idea of entering them into formal competitions was daunting. Nevertheless, a flicker of ambition lit within her. Perhaps she could show skeptics that great potential could lie beneath unpromising origins. Certain that each of them possessed a distinct gift, she devised targeted training regimens. For Tempest, who seemed blessed with agility, she constructed short courses, testing tight turns and quick bursts of speed. For Shade, clearly adept at calm precision, she worked on advanced groundwork, backing up on command, pivoting cleanly, and halting with impeccable timing. Nova, indefatigable in spirit, received longer endurance drills, even though his smaller build set him at a disadvantage against larger horses. Sienna's evenings were spent poring over equine care manuals, scribbling notes into the margins, whenever she spotted methods to refine their progress. A new sense of purpose took root in her heart. Although the local community eyed her efforts with curiosity, the tide began to turn when neighbors glimpsed the trio's remarkable improvement. Reports spread of a horse whisperer who had transformed three hopeless castaways into vibrant animals. Farmers who once shook their heads in pity or disbelief now watched with tentative respect. Some even stopped by to offer help, contributing leftover lumber so she could expand her stable, or donating used tack they no longer needed. Throughout these interactions, Sienna remained humble. She insisted her approach was not magic, but consistent care and an earnest belief in every horse's potential. Deep down, though, she felt something special about Tempest, Shade, and Nova, a determination forged by adversity. She harbored the dream of allowing that determination to shine on a bigger stage, unafraid of critics or pedigreed rivals who might deride her unorthodox start. Year after year, Tempest, Shade, and Nova continued to flourish under Sienna's attentive guidance. By the time they approached their third birthdays, they stood as striking individuals. Tempest's tall frame and muscular build, coupled with his smoky gray coloring, captivated many onlookers, especially when he launched into a canter that seemed almost effortless. Shade's once shy demeanor had softened into poised concentration. Whenever Sienna tested him with new obstacles, a row of cones or a shallow water crossing, he performed with an uncanny grace, suggesting a horse that, despite lacking grandeur, could excel in technical challenges. Nova, still the smallest, became the dynamo of the group. He possessed a near inexhaustible energy that set him apart, pushing him to continue long after his stablemates had tired. Sienna found solace and joy in training them each day, dividing her time among individualized sessions. Mornings might see her introducing Tempest to higher jumps, coaxing him to harness his nimbleness. Afternoons involved leading Shade through complex maneuver drills, fine-tuning his coordination. Nova's segment often included extended trots around the perimeter of the property, building the stamina he seemed so keen to demonstrate. Observers like Bryson, a traveling trainer who heard rumors of these rescues, stopped by and openly admitted he'd rarely seen such diverse talents in a single group. Intrigued, he asked Sienna if she planned to enter them in official competitions. Initially, the notion seemed grandiose. Silvercrest Acres, the region's leading thoroughbred stable, dominated prestigious contests, boasting well-documented bloodlines. Sienna had no illusions about matching that caliber overnight. Yet she couldn't deny the glimmer of possibility. All three horses had proven they were more than their origins. They deserved a chance to test their mettle against the best. Even so, a lingering memory cast a shadow over her thoughts. She recalled the cruelty of Mr. Balfour. His success at various events was legendary, and he wielded influence that could overshadow smaller contenders. She wrestled with fears of how the man might react if he realized these colts had survived, and more than that, thrived outside his control. Might he try to assert ownership or sabotage her efforts? Despite these concerns, Sienna resolved to move forward. The idea of letting her horses remain forever in obscurity conflicted with her growing conviction that their resilience needed to be showcased. They were living proof that compassion and determination could turn worthless animals into genuine competitors. One evening, as she watched the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues, she whispered to Tempest, Shade, and Nova that they would soon face a new challenge, one that might scare them all but was worth pursuing. Their only response was a soft nicker and the trusting gaze of creatures who had known both abandonment and salvation. It was early spring when Sienna entered Tempest, Shade, and Nova in their first modest competition at the Elmwood County Fair. She selected this venue because of its supportive ambiance and lack of the elitism that pervaded larger shows. The fair featured events like timed sprints, obstacle courses, and endurance tests, perfect opportunities to gauge how her horses performed under public scrutiny. In preparation, she created a structured routine, ensuring none of the trio was overworked. She set up homemade jumps constructed from barrels and wooden planks, designed smaller versions of typical show obstacles, and integrated them into daily training. Tempest sections emphasized bursts of speed and accurate leaping, while Shade's practice centered on intricate obstacle negotiation. Nova naturally balanced both, with an extra dash of stamina work. Packing the trailer the day before the fair, Sienna felt a nervous thrill. Each halter, saddle blanket, and grooming brush had its place. She brushed the horses until their coats gleamed, marveling at how far they had come. Though she still wondered if they would freeze in front of a crowd, she believed their bond and her careful training would carry them through. The morning of the fair dawned bright. Colorful tents lined the fairground, and the smell of fried dough mingled with the heavier scent of livestock. Sienna guided her trailer to a designated area where curious onlookers watched Tempest, Shade, and Nova step onto unfamiliar terrain. She could hear the gossip. "Are those thoroughbreds? They look decent, but who's the trainer?" She had grown adept at ignoring such chatter, focusing instead on maintaining calm and confidence so her horses would mirror her demeanor. The first event was a timed obstacle course. Sienna decided Shade was best suited for it, given his cool-headed approach. Walking him into the arena, she surveyed the various hurdles, barrels, poles, a shallow water segment, and felt her heart drum in her chest. When the buzzer sounded, they were off. Shade trotted through the course with careful precision, weaving between poles without grazing a single one. He approached the water obstacle, ears flicking in mild uncertainty, but advanced steadily, receiving applause from a modest crowd. By the time they finished, the clock showed a competitive time. Next came a short sprint for Tempest, who launched forward with a surge so powerful that spectators gasped. His leaps were fluid and his turns crisp. After a final dash to the finish line, a quick glance at the scoreboard told Sienna he had matched some of the highest marks. Later, Nova tackled an endurance run. Though smaller than the other horses, he sustained a brisk pace throughout, surprising many onlookers. Their combined performance sparked curiosity, and whispers spread of how these mystery horses managed to challenge more established competitors. By the fair's conclusion, all three horses had placed in their respective events, a feat that did not go unnoticed. Small-town newspapers published brief stories on the remarkable rescue trio, and fairgoers approached Sienna with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. Some offered to buy her horses on the spot, evidently seeing a lucrative opportunity. She politely declined every offer, explaining that her aim was not merely to profit, but to support these animals she had nursed from dire circumstances. Returning to her homestead, she felt an invigorating sense of possibility. Local recognition was a start, but it also underscored the potential for bigger stages. Indeed, a few weeks after the fair, Sienna received a formal invitation to participate in the Gilt Valley Classic, an event she knew to be among the region's most prestigious. This annual competition drew stables from far and wide, including the formidable Silvercrest Acres. While the letter welcomed her to register Tempest, Shade, and Nova, it also implied stiff rivalry. Elite trainers with generations of breeding expertise and deep financial backing took part in the Classic every year. Yet Sienna saw it as a pivotal moment. She could prove, once and for all, that dedication and kindness sometimes surpassed pedigree alone. Accepting would mean significant expenses, travel fees, accommodation, the need for advanced gear. But the opportunity was too valuable to pass up. A swirl of excitement and nerves followed. She prepared by intensifying each horse's regimen. Tempest focused on higher jumps and more technical sequences, building the reflexes needed for top-level show jumping. Shade, with his calm agility, practiced increasingly complex obstacle tasks, from weaving around tight corners to halting on command within measured strides. Nova doubled down on stamina drills, trotting and cantering around a makeshift track Sienna had staked out near the forest's edge. The final month of training brought its own pressures. With so much on the line, Sienna feared pushing them too hard. She closely monitored each horse's mood and physical well-being. Any sign of fatigue or strain prompted adjustments to the schedule. If they reached the Classic exhausted, they would stand no chance. Striking a balance between rigorous preparation and protective care became her chief concern. At night, she would often dream of Mr. Balfour's imposing figure lurking in the background. Despite the Colts' remarkable progress, the memory of how they were once cast aside weighed on her. The question gnawed at her. How would he react if she confronted him publicly, horses in tow, proving his earlier judgment was flawed? Despite the unease, her resolve never wavered. She finished her final training sessions with quiet determination, believing that their story of rescue, perseverance, and unexpected triumph deserved a platform as grand as the Gilt Valley Classic. When Sienna arrived at the Gilt Valley Classic, the scale of the event overwhelmed her at first. Rows of pristine white tents dotted the grounds, and towering grandstands framed a sprawling show arena. Sponsors' banners fluttered in the breeze, showcasing names synonymous with equestrian wealth and prestige. Silvercrest Acres had an entire wing of stables secured, identified by large placards bearing Mr. Balfour's name. Nearby were other influential stables, each boasting a staff large enough to attend to every minute detail of their horses' care. In contrast, Sienna arrived in a single pickup truck and a well-worn trailer. Despite her modest setup, she carried herself with poise as she checked in with event officials. Tempest, Shade, and Nova followed her lead into the assigned stalls, heads swiveling to take in the new environment. The bustling foot traffic, the loudspeakers announcing scheduling updates, and the presence of so many horses in close quarters were unlike anything they had experienced. She spent the first afternoon simply letting them acclimate. She walked them around the grounds, ensuring they didn't become too rattled by the crowds, the camera flashes, or the general clamor. Tension still gripped her when she thought of Mr. Balfour. At any moment, she expected to hear his voice ring out, questioning her right to be there. And indeed, late that day, while hand-walking Tempest, she heard a curt command echo from behind. Stop. Turning, she found herself face to face with the man she had dreaded meeting. Garbed in an impeccably tailored riding jacket, Mr. Balfour eyed the gray stallion with a blend of disbelief and recognition. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, he asked in a clipped tone if this was one of the foals he'd had removed years earlier. Sienna nodded, summoning her courage. She explained that she had rescued Tempest, along with two others, on the very day they were abandoned. Mr. Balfour's jaw tightened. He muttered that he had acted for the good of his operation, but stopped short of offering an apology. Instead, he demanded to know if she intended to sell them back to Silvercrest Acres. She refused outright, stating that she considered them family, not merchandise. The exchange was brief and tense. Mr. Balfour stalked away, leaving Sienna anxious and more determined than ever. She suspected he might attempt some maneuver to reclaim or discredit the horses, but she also felt an odd satisfaction in having brought them here to stand on their own merits. By the time night fell, anticipation weighed heavily on everyone. The Classic's official competitions would begin the next morning, and Sienna realized a critical truth. If her horses performed well, no attempt by Mr. Balfour to diminish them could eclipse the public's admiration. Day one of the Gilt Valley Classic launched with a series of preliminary rounds, featuring time-jumping courses and agility tests. Many stables treated these as warm-ups for their main events, but for Sienna, each round presented a vital opportunity to prove her horse's worth. Tempest was up first, entered in a mid-level jumping class. Riding him into the ring, she couldn't ignore the sea of spectators in the stands. Officials in crisp uniforms marked their positions near the jumps, clipboards and stopwatches ready. The buzzer sounded and Tempest sprang forward, hooves thundering across the turf. The first fence approached rapidly, but he cleared it with enviable grace. A murmur rippled through the audience. He continued with barely a stumble, navigating combinations that tested both speed and control. When he sailed over the final spread, Sienna heard the thunder of applause. Their time placed them near the top of the leaderboard, a fact that sparked conversations among onlookers unfamiliar with the name Sienna Rivers. Next, Shade tackled an advanced obstacle challenge designed for handlers on foot. Trotting beside him, Sienna guided him through an intricate pattern of cones, narrow chutes, and raised cavaletti. In a test of composure, they faced a water feature some horses found intimidating, but Shade stepped into the shallow pool calmly, water splashing around his legs without causing alarm. Observers, particularly those partial to flamboyant showmanship, were surprised by the duo's understated competence. When the judges posted their scores, it was clear that Shade's measured accuracy rivaled that of horses from bigger stables. Finally, Nova starred in an endurance sprint, merging the speed of a gallop with the discipline to maintain form across multiple laps. Spectators gasped at the contrast between his smaller frame and the towering competition. Yet from the outset, Nova surged ahead, his legs churning tirelessly. Each round he completed without losing steam, while larger horses faltered or needed to slow. By the final lap, he had lapped one horse and was closing in on another. The finish line appeared, and Nova rocketed across, well ahead of expectations. The stands erupted in cheers. Cameras flashed. A commentator somewhere exclaimed about this tiny wonder that had come out of nowhere. In the VIP area, Mr. Balfour watched with a scowl, arms folded. Although his own horses performed respectably, Sienna's trio was creating a stir that no one had foreseen. Reporters began asking questions. Where did these horses come from? How were they trained? A few bold voices even mentioned rumors that they were rejects from a famous breeding program. Sienna, exhausted but elated, returned her horses to their stalls, determined to keep them calm for the bigger events yet to come. As day two dawned, the stakes rose higher. The Guilt Valley Classic drew massive crowds for its headline competitions, jump-offs that scaled formidable heights, precision obstacle runs, and cross-country challenges stretching through wooded trails behind the main arena. Tempest, Shade, and Nova were each entered in distinct categories that highlighted their individual strengths. Before the morning's events, Sienna took extra care grooming them, ensuring they felt confident amidst the buzz of hundreds of onlookers. Tempest's class involved a jump-off at elevated heights, pushing even seasoned show jumpers to their limits. Clad in simple but well-fitting tack, Sienna guided him to the start. Heart pounding, she gave him a reassuring pat. Once signaled to begin, Tempest launched into motion. Fence after fence blurred by. A combination of verticals tested his reaction time, but he cleared them cleanly. Even the triple bar, a wide, daunting obstacle, did not unnerve him. By the time they landed the last jump, the clock displayed a time that sent an audible ripple of excitement through the spectators. Shade's next event was a refined agility course incorporating changes of gait, pivot turns, and sidestepping through narrow channels. Typically, such a ring was reserved for meticulously bred warm bloods, known for their docile yet athletic nature. Yet Shade navigated each section with a calm focus that belied his early anxious beginnings. Sienna used subtle hand signals, and he responded as if reading her mind. The judges conferred briefly after the run, then awarded high marks, praising Shade's suppleness and concentration. Nova's test was the cross-country phase, a long circuit through fields and woodland paths dotted with log jumps, banks, and water hazards. Though less flashy than show jumping in the main arena, cross-country demanded courage, stamina, and trust between horse and rider. Sienna guided Nova at a steady canter, mindful that pacing would make or break them. He responded with gusto, bounding over logs and splashing through shallow streams. Where other horses balked at steep banks, Nova dug in his hooves and powered up, ears forward. At the halfway mark, they were still running strong, even overtaking a pair of larger horses that struggled with the rough terrain. Re-emerging into the open, they galloped past the finish, finishing among the top times. By evening, all three had advanced to final rounds in their respective categories. Silvercrest Acres remained competitive, but whispers circulated that Mr. Balfour had not counted on direct rivalry from the same Colts he had once ordered discarded. Tension grew with each new success. In the stables, Sienna kept her horses relaxed, massaging tired muscles and speaking to them softly about how proud she was. Despite her anxious mind, constantly scanning the crowd for any sign of Balfour's machinations, she felt closer than ever to proving that compassion and skill could rival affluence and pedigree. The final day of the Guilt Valley Classic arrived in a blaze of anticipation, marked by the largest crowds yet. Cameras perched on high platforms to capture every riveting moment, and commentators readied themselves to narrate dramatic finishes. Each division crowned an overall champion based on cumulative scores. For Sienna, the day promised some of the most challenging courses yet. Tempest would face an advanced jump-off full of towering fences and tricky combinations. Shade was set for a high-level agility and obedience trial, requiring flawless communication. Nova, the undeniable crowd favorite, would run a culminating endurance circuit that combined open gallops with technical obstacles. Standing with her horses at sunrise, Sienna breathed in the crisp air. She could sense their readiness, the bond they'd forged during training sessions far from any spotlight. She checked their tack meticulously, wanting no avoidable mishaps. In the stands, spectators buzzed, placing bets and exchanging rumors about these unlikely contenders. Mr. Balfour loomed in the VIP box, flanked by sponsors and staff, his expression unreadable. When Tempest entered the ring, the hush was nearly palpable. Sienna guided him toward the first fence, a high vertical. He soared over it, mane streaming. The subsequent turns demanded precision and speed. Any misalignment could bring down poles and incur penalties. Yet he handled each challenge as if it were second nature, clearing the last oxer to thunderous applause. Shade's agility trial followed suit, maneuvering around tight cones, stepping backward on a narrow plank, and transitioning gaits seamlessly. He exhibited control rarely seen even in top-tier horse and handler teams. Sienna's crisp commands found immediate reflection in Shade's movements, earning them an impressive score. Finally, Nova stood at the start of the endurance track, ears flicking with excitement. A hush settled as officials announced the circuit details. Multiple miles of varied terrain, water passages, and short bursts of steeplechase-like jumps. At the horn, Nova launched forward. Each stride pounded the turf, fueled by the same resilience that had pulled him through those uncertain early days. Onlookers gasped when he bounded over a hedge that had unseated a larger horse. Approaching the final stretch, exhaustion was clear, but Nova pushed on, crossing the finish line with a triumphant cry that left the audience roaring. When the dust settled and cumulative scores were tallied, Tempest, Shade, and Nova emerged at or near the top in their divisions. Combined, they propelled Sienna to an overall champion title few had predicted. As she accepted the gleaming trophy, tears streamed down her face. Cameras flashed, capturing this moment of hard-earned vindication. She thanked her horses publicly, proclaiming their story proof that no life was truly worthless if given hope and care. Though Mr. Balfour watched in tight-lipped silence, the message was clear. These so-called weaklings had shattered every expectation, standing tall as undisputed champions of heart, endurance, and spirit. Looking back on the entire saga, it's impossible not to feel inspired by how a few caring hands and steadfast determination can spark miracles. The scrawny, frightened Colts, once left on the brink of disaster, emerged as champions who challenged what we thought was possible. Their success wasn't just about winning trophies, but about redefining hope, proving that even the smallest light can cut through the darkest doubt. And the young rescuers' unwavering belief in them serves as a shining example of how empathy and dedication can transform lives. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of this story touched you the most? Have you ever witnessed or experienced a second chance that changed everything? Please share your comments and opinions below. Your perspective helps us learn and grow together. Thank you for watching, and we hope you continue to follow our channel for more uplifting stories.